3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? You're watching Ash on Comics. My name is Ash, and wow, here's today's comic. It is House of X, issue 5 of 6. But that of 6 doesn't really matter because this is a screwed up miniseries in the sense that it's 2 series in one. I think this is actually part 9 of 12. This is what it should be. Joining me today, as always, is Stan the Man. He needs really no introduction, but he's co-host of the channel and a resident intern and expert on all things trash. Also celebrity guest, because this is Forky. He's a movie star. You should know who he is. If you haven't seen his movie, well, then you just must not like movies. Look at this cover. Just very provocative. One of the reasons I like reading my comics on my iPad, first of all, it's a gorgeous screen. This is 12-inch screen. It's even bigger than a comic book. But when you get lighting effects like this, just the sun coming up, I don't think it's coming across in the camera very well. At least not through what I'm viewing on the phone. But it has this luminescence that you can't come off on a page. This is something that only digitally can come across. Now, I'm not disparaging paper comics by any means. I know there's a lot of people that love reading comics on paper, and I still like reading comics on paper. There's something great about that tactile feel, the turning of the pages, holding it in your hand. I get it. I do get it. I'm simply saying there are other great things that this particular medium has as well. That's all. I'm not trying to say the other one sucks, go here. I'm just saying there are advantages to both. And this is just one of the things. But I'm not going to get bogged down in the reeds, pun intended, about that. Let's just get into this comic and hope my camera holds out. Do you want to know the real difference between them and us? Until now, we were never given a chance, Professor X. Oh boy. There's something I noticed when I was reading this. Down here, it's got these little codes. I think a lot of this is just like flavor. It's Krakoa, Krat 0.1, Koa 2.1, right? It's got all this stuff. But down here, it says Xavier Alpha. Xavier Alpha. Why would you need a delineator for something if there is not more than one, right? If there's no beta, there's no omega, whatever, of Xavier, then you don't need Xavier Alpha. There's, you know what I'm saying? If there's only one Xavier, you don't need to say Xavier Alpha. This is something that I caught. I don't know if anyone else has caught this. If you have, tell me what your thoughts are on that. And we open up. Krakoa. Humans. Is there any good in them? Well, Lorna, it's important to remember that mankind didn't really take off as a species until hunting and gathering ended, and they transformed themselves into an agrarian culture. They stopped moving around and said, "This is a good place. It is fertile and ours, and from this land we will not be moved." And that's one good thing that humans taught us. Society. And immediately, if you remember from issue 1, this looks very familiar. Remember this sort of tree thing-ish that you can see down there? The pods? Perhaps it's a little too bright. Charles and I always wondered what would happen if mutants stopped being hunted. If we didn't have to run anymore, didn't have to hide. What would happen when, like with man, the greatest necessary traits in mutantum weren't strength and aggressiveness, but intelligence, ingenuity, and creativity. And now we know. Here they come, Father. Yes, here they come. So we're introduced to some new mutants. Now, these aren't really new when you discover who they are, but I didn't recognize any of these people until they were identified. So we move on, and the first one is Gold Balls. Fabio Medina. And Magneto says, he had seemingly a benign and pointless power. He could make golden balls appear. So then we discovered they were eggs. And this already, my mind is starting to unravel, right? This is one thing that Hickman does so great in these books, is he just like peels back the layer and says, oh, this seemingly innocuous thing is very meaningful. Dang it, dogs. I don't know if you can hear the banging around and going out the dog door. So, Gold Balls is a joke of a character. To this day, it's from the Bendis run of X-Men. And when you hear we've been bringing up Bendis' run on X-Men, people just talk about he created gold balls. Like, and they don't say that in a flattering way. Like, it's a joke. Like, it signifies what his run on X-Men was. But then you take someone who's a great writer and not a hack, like Hickman. And that's right, Fragmentian, if you're watching my video. I just said Hickman's not a hack. You take something like this joke that Bendis created, and you make something out of it, and you say, oh, this is interesting. So he makes eggs. But the interesting thing about these eggs is they're non-viable. They're just worthless eggs. Nothing hatches out of them, if you will. Enter Proteus. Proteus is Moira McTaggart's mutant son. If you remember from the old school Claremont run of X-Men, he has complete control over reality. He's, at the time when he was introduced, was like the most powerful mutant on Earth. He was kind of replaced by Franklin Richards, who has almost an identical power. And I've never seen Proteus look like this, but I'm fine. So his thing is using his reality manipulation powers is he changes reality, and these eggs are viable. Then enter Elixir. Elixir, the life giver, kickstarts the process of cellular replication. So she's able to inject existing human DNA, or mutant DNA, I should say, into these eggs. So now these eggs are viable. Now they have the DNA of a mutant, right? And then after that, the embryo, I can't even talk. The embryo needs time to mature. Enter Ava Bell. She has some sort of time manipulation powers. I'm not real familiar with her character. She's more of a modern X-Men, I think. All these characters are more modern X-Men. I'm more of an old school Claremont guy. So she manipulates how their existence in time, so it only takes like 2 days to mature rather than years or whatever it might normally take. And then Hope Summers, the daughter of Jean, is it daughter of Jean or is it daughter of Cable? I can't remember. It's a Summers kid, whatever. She's got the crazy mutant power that she can be any mutant power, I think, is how I understood it. And so her thing is she unites their powers together, like without her connecting them and working in tangent. I guess she's like the linchpin to the whole thing. So that's kind of how Hickman explains all of this, and Xavier's watching on. And we come to this page. Together, these 5 mutants have made us whole. And do you remember this image? You should. It was from the very first issue. Remember, hatching out of the eggs, a strange woman and a man. We now know for sure, many have suspected, that it was Cyclops and Jean Grey. To me, my X-Men. And then Lorna says, here's what I don't get, Father. Is it just their bodies temporarily evolved to their desired age? Perhaps even to their optimal and perfected form? But it's not them, is it? It's just a shell. Watch. And then, all this time, everyone has misunderstood what Cerebro was. Yes, Charles used it to locate mutants, blah, 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 but really its function was that of copying sort of the consciousness, the essence, they call it the essence, the anima of any mutant that Xavier found. So Xavier has been stockpiling this information. And there's Luke the dog, always making sure he gets on camera. So, think about what we learned about in the previous issues. Mr. Sinister has been tasked to gather all the mutant DNA, which is now how they have that. Xavier this whole time has been using Cerebro to capture all mutant consciousness and essence, I guess, whatever they call it, their anima, so that one day it says he could put the soul back into the mutant shell. So this is one of those revelatory issues. It's not like a lot of action like we've seen before. This is more like the Moira issue, where it's just like, we're going to reveal stuff to you. It's not quite as head exploding the way the Moira issue was, but still, you're just like, geez. And he's like, there you are, my boy. Even knowing I could bring you back, a part of me dies when any of you do. So let's not do that again, shall we? And Scott grabs his arm. I love the tangent of the writer, or the how do I say, the synergy, I guess, of the writer and the artist here. The way this scene is captured, and this artist, who is it again? Pepe Larraz, is just doing some really good emotional scenes here that just capture. You don't even need to read the words, but Scott says, "Did it work?" Xavier responds, "It did. You succeeded, and your sacrifice was not in vain. It was a gift, and in the giving, you saved us all." Thank you, Scott. Thank all of you. So the X-Men are back, and now some people might be like, "Oh, let's pull the carpet out from under us. That was cheap. We had this great, epic, massive sacrifice, and now they're just back." I kind of get that. I feel that a little bit myself. But to be honest with you, when I was reading that comic book, which is still one of the most epic books I've ever read, some of the scenes in there, I should say, are the most epic scenes. I love it. But in the back of my head, I knew, this isn't the end of Wolverine or the end of Nightcrawler. This isn't their death. It was a death for them, but somehow something was going to be undone. Somehow they would be brought back. Whether it was time travel, whether it was Moira having a new life, whether they weren't actually Wolverine and Nightcrawler, I don't know. I knew it wasn't permanent. So when I think about it that way and I see this, yes, while it does make their death feel a little bit cheaper, we can just send you out, you die, we just bring you back. It's like a video game. You just, we respawn you. It does tend to cheapen it, but I kind of knew that already. So it's not like the real, the things I guess it harkens back to the death of Superman, right? When DC killed Superman. Everyone knew Superman would come back somehow, right? Anyways. So we get the credits page. And now we see Storm. Brothers and sisters of Krakoa, a great thing has happened today. A miracle made possible by mutant hands. And this, to me, echoed the Matrix. If you remember, I think it was in The Matrix Reloaded, when Morpheus addresses all of, I'm drawing a blank on the underground city, the last city. And he's just like, hear me! He has that speech. This feels like an homage to that. And you can see all the people and the X-Men are sort of like, Morpheus's crew. They're the heroes, and everyone's just kind of almost worshiping them in a way. Especially these guys, the Five, as they're called, the ones that make the life. And we see the X-Men here standing all nude because they've just been birthed. This is interesting perspective. If you go back and read issue 1, we now know how this all fits chronologically. Issue 1 actually happens after some of the other things that we've read in the books. Hickman is doing some very confusing storytelling on purpose. He's not trying to confuse you in the sense that you don't understand what you're reading. It's more of smoke and mirrors storytelling. He's deliberately trying to obfuscate what's happening by using nonlinear storytelling and showing you things and making you think, oh, okay, I kind of understand what's happening, but it's actually happening at a different point in time. And when you're able to chronologically insert it correctly, that scene has a whole different impact on you, and you understand things differently. And that's really kind of clever writing technique if you can do it well, and Hickman is doing it really well. Now we get this weird kind of ceremony where Storm, because they're like, well, how do we know it's really them? So Storm's like, what is your name? Cyclops, Scott Summers. And how do I know it is you, brother? I once thought I was strong, a leader of mutants, and then you showed me what strong was. So this goes back to, I think, X-Men 201, way back when I was reading, even before I started reading comics, when Storm, the Mohawk Storm, beat Cyclops to take the mantle of leadership. And she responds with a kiss to the forehead. I learned by watching you. So there's something weird here when you're reading this. Part of it feels really kind of creepy. It feels like this very almost Scientology kind of cultish weird thing to it. But then you see doses of humanity, like how she kisses Cyclops on the forehead. And the humanity in us, the reader, we can empathize and we can feel this. And then she speaks back to him. This is my brother. I know him, as do you. Yes, his name is Cyclops, but he is more than that. What is he? Mutant! And then she does the same with Marvel Girl and all the other. And it's interesting. I'm not sure how to make of it. We go forward, and Professor X and Magneto talking, and they expose. He says, "My God, I should be happy watching this. I should be weeping with joy, but..." And Xavier responds, "I know. Over the years, man has killed millions of us, and so many remain lost. But this is the good work, Eric. And it must continue until Genosha is spoken of not as a grave, but as a crucible. The work will continue until it is done. It is foundational, everything. They should have killed us all when they had the chance." And then, look at this panel here. He says that, and Xavier just sort of has this half-turned-up smile. This is not the Charles Xavier that we know. And I think, I'm trusting the reader, I'm trusting the author. Everyone tells me Hickman doesn't do anything without a plan. Everything means something. Everything is well revealed. Okay. So far, he's been delivering the goods, and what I'm reading, I'm enjoying. But this scares me. If in the hands of your typical Marvel writer, I would just be, screw this book. Because I wouldn't have faith in them. I would just be like, this is mustard and bigotry all over again. They don't know what they're doing. They're screwing up the characters to pass their own agendas. And but because Hickman is a solid writer with a good track record, and a lot of people I trust say, dude, no, just trust in Hickman. He'll deliver. I say, okay, I'm gonna open my mind. I'm gonna trust that he knows what he's doing, and he's gonna deliver. And then they talk about the UN vote. Remember, that's all happened in previous books, but chronologically, we're flipping back. It hasn't actually happened. And we get this, big celebration. Like I said, back to the whole Matrix Reloaded scene. We get some white pages that talk about the genetic base and the host. And Hickman goes into his big, long thing about how all this resurrection stuff works. So after you've read this, you can go into here and get a much deeper expository explanation of the whole thing. And look, it's 3 pages. This is a lot. It's kind of intimidating, but I assure you, it's worth it if you're into this book. And I like these notes that are all in bold. They talk about extensive testing, and they explain some different things, like how maybe some of the 5 could be substituted with certain mutants, like Mimic, because, he can copy powers. So they also talk about ideas of, like, it hasn't actually happened, but what would you do if you tried to put the consciousness of one mutant or whatever, but into a different husk? So some interesting things that get you thinking here. I think Hickman is sort of setting up some sort of like, start thinking about these things because I got plans. Then we go to the United Nations, and they're about to cast a vote about recognizing Krakoa as its own nation. And here we get again Charles being kind of weird and talking to Emma Frost. He's like, "It's our nation, Miss Frost. Due, I suspect, in no small measure to you." "By whatever do you mean, Charles?" And they're talking telepathically. "I got the sense that the Security Council wasn't going to support us today. More than a sense, really." And he basically confronts her and says, "I know you kind of like mess with people's minds to sway the vote." And she says, "Are you accusing me of something, Charles?" He responds with a toast. "I just wanted you to know that I know, and a grateful nation thanks you for your sacrifice." "You're welcome. Now buy me something pretty, or I don't know, make me a governor of a province." To the first, what do you get the woman who already can buy anything she wants? As to the second, you already know I have much bolder things in mind. And that is just very sinister storytelling. And I mean that in an intentional pun of sorts, because we have Sinister, we know he's at play. Part of me thinks Xavier is Sinister. Why would you think that, Ash? Well, one, because I don't know who Xavier is. At first, people are like, "Oh, he looks like the Maker, da-da-da." Now we know we've entered Sinister. We now know that Sinister is on to things. And with all those different Sinister clones, I don't think we actually saw any of the real Sinisters. I think Xavier might be the real Sinister all along. And because these white pages talk about things like I mentioned, what would happen if you took the consciousness of one being, and everything, and put it in a different husk. Also, in issue 1 of this, of this series, they have on the white pages, they have all the Omega mutants. One is very obviously missing, and that is Charles Xavier. If Charles Xavier isn't an Omega level telepath, I don't know what to say. Like, it didn't make sense to me, but he was missing. So, yeah. These are all, of course, wild speculation. I don't know anything. This is how I'm interpreting things, and that's kind of the reason I'm talking and making videos like this. This book makes you want to talk and makes you want to theory craft and makes you want to bounce ideas off other people and hear other people's ideas and see, did I miss something? Did you interpret something that I missed? This book really does it. Here's another white page that talks about how the vote went and certain countries went against it. I thought this was kind of interesting. Wakanda voted against it. Their reason, they do not need mutant drugs. Of course, because Wakanda is a bunch of elitist a-holes. And then this was kind of unnecessary. It talks about the mutant diplomacy maps, all the people who voted against it. You can get a kind of visual geographically. The problem is, I don't know where Genosha is on this map. So that would be kind of help. Now we get to the end of the book. And we see Wolverine staring at one of the gates. 2 days later, Krakoa. "You sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." "An opportunity to change is exactly what I'm offering, Wolverine." "Chuck, I gotta tell you, when you talk like that, I kind of want to beat you to death. Some people are beyond saving." "If that were true, would you be here? Would I?" "Incoming, Professor. There are so many, blah, blah, blah." Okay. And then through the gate comes the plethora. This is basically the rogues gallery of the X-Men, including Apocalypse. Krakoa. Yes, I know. It's been too long. And it's almost like Apocalypse is communicating with Krakoa. Now, we've seen in the past, the only people that could communicate with Krakoa is Doug Ramsey and Professor Xavier, who can only do so because of his telepathy. Apocalypse, well, he's Apocalypse. "Making yourself a little too comfortable, aren't you, pal?" Comfortable is an adequate word, but yes, I am comfortable. Krakoa knows me, and I, Krakoa. "Is that so?" So if you remember in previous book, we go back to the way past where Apocalypse, before anyone, he talks about how He was there at the beginning when Krakoa was there. Now, they talk about, are you going to be able to follow the rules, da-da-da-da-da, and Apocalypse just basically says, look, for centuries, I have fostered war and conflict, all in the hopes of mutantdom finally asserting dominance over this world. Now look at you. Look at all of you. You have finally become what I intended you to be. I could not be more proud. Magneto says, we need to hear the words. And Apocalypse says, we submit to the laws of this land, be what they may, and acknowledge that from this day forward we all serve a higher purpose than want or need. One people from this day forward. And Xavier says, very well, then let it all be known, Krakoa is for all mutants. And boom, you get the image we thought we'd never see. Xavier shaking hands with Apocalypse. Welcome home. Wow. Oh, wow. If you are us, then be with us. Come home. Magneto. 2 series that are one. Here we are. Like I said, 9, 10, 11, yeah, it's 9 out of 12. The red ones are the big revelatory issues so far, and that's how it's been. So we know that this last one, of course, is going to be a big mind screw. So we've got 3 more issues. That's 3 weeks. This has been fantastic. This isn't my favorite issue, but with a series this good, to say that it is a worthy entry into the series is high praise. Hickman is telling a fantastic story. I've seen in comments on other videos and people talking about, one person I saw mentioned that Hickman is telling a great sci-fi story, not a superhero story, and that's what XMen is about. I kind of understand what that person was going towards, and I somewhat agree but disagree also, because X-Men have always been heroes. I think what makes X-Men great is that it's a science story or a science fiction story and also has superheroes in it. The X-Men have always been champions for humanity, right? We've seen them have to fight against, the racism against mutants or whatever and all that nonsense. But unlike what the modern progressive comics crowd would have you believe, X-Men is not an allegory to bigotry and racism. It has it in the books, for sure. Claremont did tell some stories. But racists and things like that, that is just one of many types of villainy. Stringing up mutants to kill them because you are some sort of eugenics person and you think you need to commit genocide against mutants, that makes for an excellent villain. It makes for an excellent conflict. But the X-Men have always had, they've done other things. They fought against the Brood. They've gone off into space and helped the Shi'ar Empire. They've done so many different things. They fight your typical story type villains like Arcade, who's got the murder house, and it's just like he captures people and throws them in, and it's like he's like the original Saw. He was like the PG version of Saw. X-Men have so many different villains, and I think people lose focus on this idea. It's like no, it's just an allegory. They represent the gays and the minorities and all the persecution. It's like no. That stuff is out there, and the X-Men have been used to tell stories against that sort of villainy because, yes, we all know racism is bad. We all know genocide is bad. That's not a political thing. That's a moral thing, and superheroes are paragons of virtue. They stand up against. Superman would stand up against that just as much as the X-Men would, right? So people get that confused. Now, anyways, I'm getting bogged in the weeds again. This book, I don't know where I stand on it. And let me tell you why. I think it's an excellent sci-fi book, right? Excellent. That user, that person, I don't have their name, I'm sorry, said, it succeeds as a sci-fi book as what X-Men should be. to which part I illustrated how I agree. But where it's not succeeding is the superhero part, which I firmly maintain that the X-Men are. The X-Men have always been champions for humanity, and their fellow mutants as well, of course. But that was Xavier's dream, was that humanity and mutants will all just be one in harmony, and there wouldn't be this division. Kind of similar to, and I know I'm going to eat my words here, and people are going to be like, aha, aha, Ash, but kind of similar to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, right? Well, no, don't read into that so much. Anyways, the X-Men as portrayed here in the House of X in this whole series come off like a bunch of fascists. Krakoa is an absolute ethno-state. Some of the ethics and morality that have been exhibited by the X-Men, like manipulating world leaders to vote on their behalf, in a real world sense, I can see that happening. A nation's going to look out for its interests and use underhanded tactics to get what it wants. Yes. So I enjoy it from a story standpoint. But I also look at this as an X-Men book. And these are not the X-Men. This is not. They look like the X-Men. They talk like the X-Men. And even sometimes even act like the X-Men. The fight on the space station was epic. And the conversations between Wolverine and Nightcrawler and watching Cyclops have to send his friends to die brought tears to my eyes. Like, that was epic, and that's what I want more of. I want to care about these characters again, but Hickman hasn't been doing that for the most part, except for that one little bit. He's been focusing on this heavy plot and heavy world building, and I'm okay with it because I'm on board. I'm like, this is a story. When this is all said and done, and it's wrapped up as a 12-issue miniseries, and I can go buy this as an omnibus, and I think, depending on how the ending is, I think I'm going to love it and cherish it. But am I going to be on board for what I'm reading here as an ongoing X-Men series? I don't think so. This is kind of bothering me. As I'm reading this and I'm seeing this weird, these ethno-state, very fascist-oriented people, it's starting to make sense why there's a book called The Marauders. Why would the X-Men make up a team that goes out, calls themselves a Marauder, but these X-Men would? And that's what I'm doing. My struggle is I'm looking to the future, and I'm seeing all these books that are going to be released, the new Excalibur, which has Apocalypse in it. I go, well, X-Men would never have Apocalypse on one of their teams, but these X-Men would. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's making me very wary, because for the whole time I've been reading this up to now, I feel like, okay, something's going to get revealed. These aren't the real X-Men. This is either the Ultimate Universe version of X-Men. These are some weird Krakoan pod people clones. This is some weird Mr. Sinister experiment. Something's going to be revealed. The real X, I don't know. But now I'm not so sure. And that bothers me. It doesn't matter how good the story is if it's not something I want to embrace. And I will admit, story, fantastic. Kirkman, out of this world, round of applause. This is among some of the greatest X-Men drama I've ever read. The plot line is some of the densest, meatiest. I can sink my teeth into it. I love it. But I worry about where it's going. I think a lot of new fans, if you came into X-Men after 2000, you never experienced the Claremont era, I think those fans aren't going to have a problem with it. And that's another thing that I worry about, because X-Men has been dead to me for 20 years. The X-Men fans of today are mostly people who aren't like me. They're the people that liked the Bendis X-Men, or the Joss Whedon X-Men, or the Grant Morrison X-Men. These are, like, I hear people say, Grant Morrison's was like one of the greatest X-Men runs of all time. I couldn't even finish it. I think modern writing, and because of the movies too, the Fox, Marvel's lost all sense of what the X-Men are. And it's been just built upon by new writers who don't have a sense of what it is, but they're building on the previous writer who also didn't have a sense of what it is, and it's just compounding and getting worse. Hickman shows a lot of insight. So I'm having some hope and some faith. And like I said, when you tell a great story, sometimes it overwrites everything. Anyways, I've been babbling way too long on this. I just have so much to say, and I wish I could interact and you guys could talk back. I could do this like a live stream, but I don't have the view count to get that many people in to pop up a live stream. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this, hearing what I have to say, taking it like a podcast, hearing some opinions, some reflections on the book. Please feel free to give me your reflections and opinions on the book, how you interpret it. My way is not the only way. It's just, it comes from my life experience and my subjective reactions. You may have different ones, and that's great. We all love things differently. Some people aren't even enjoying this. They're thinking, whatever, screw it. Okay, that's fine too. But I'm loving this. I know a lot of my fellow YouTubers and people that I interact with on comic social media are really digging this, and X-Men has not been this exciting to me since the mid-90s. So thanks for watching. I really, really appreciate all your views. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate all the love and support that I've been given, and hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.